Step 4. Storing the water. There are two main ways of storing water. Firstly, you can store water directly in the soil. The second method, which you see everywhere, is to store water in containers, such as tanks. We will look at both methods in more detail. Storing water in the soil. There are a number of different water harvesting and conservation techniques that you can use to store water in the soil. Here we are going to briefly look at swales, stone bunts or mounds, terraces, tide ridges, and fertility pits. All of these techniques seek to do what we have discussed already: intercept runoff, slow it down, and help it to infiltrate the soil. Swales. A swale is an earth ridge, mound, or bunt constructed along a contour with a furrow or ditch on the upslope side of the bank. The top of the bank is leveled off to allow planting. To make a swale, you first need to mark out your contours. Then dig a ditch along the contour about 30 to 40 centimeters deep and 50 centimeters wide. The soil is placed downslope of the ditch and used to create a ridge that is level on top. Walk along the ridge and stamp on the soil to compact it slightly. Typically, permanent crops, such as fruit trees, are planted just below the ridge of the swale, while seasonal crops are planted in between swales. Swales are a good idea at the top of a garden or field, and if the garden is on a slope, you can place swales at regular intervals inside the garden. Stone bunts and terraces. A stone bunt is a wall or heap of stones placed along contour lines to slow down, filter, and spread out runoff water, thus increasing infiltration and reducing soil erosion. Over time, sediment is captured on the higher side of the bunt, and this accumulates to form natural terraces. This takes time to develop. Terraces, on the other hand, are constructed quickly. Terraces look like steps along the contours of a hillside, with flat planting areas in between the steps, where planting beds can be developed. Terraces are effective ways of stabilizing a hill slope that would otherwise be too steep for crop production, and it prevents erosion by preventing runoff from cascading down the hill, and instead helps it to sink into the soil along the steps. We saw a good example of the effectiveness of terraces when we visited Mr. X from Gogela in the Umzimvubu Valley in southern KwaZulu-Natal. His homestead was situated on a very rocky hill, which he developed into terraces and planting beds. He gets an abundance of vegetables from his terraces. Terraces can be supported by an earth bank or a stone wall or even rows of old tires. To make terraces, you usually start at the bottom of the slope and work upwards. The first step is to mark out the contour lines for each of the terraces you plan to build. If the hill is very steep, then the terraces will only be about 2 meters wide, and if the hill has a gentle slope, then the terraces can be more like 8 meters wide. The next step is to dig a ditch along the contour line. The ditch should be about 40 centimeters deep and 60 centimeters wide. Place the soil upslope of the ditch. Start building the terrace wall by placing large stones along the base of the ditch. Place the bigger stones on the downslope side of the ditch and the smaller stones on the upslope side. Pack the stones so that they lean back against the soil to ensure that the wall remains stable. Fill any gaps between the larger stones with smaller stones. You then repeat this process and build ditches and terrace walls along each of the marked contour lines up the slope. Finally, level the soil between each terrace to make flat planting beds. To avoid erosion at the ends of the terraces, each terrace should overflow sideways into a drain or into the next terrace. The drain needs to be protected with rocks, branches, or grass. Tide ridges. Tide ridges is a method that increases the water available to plants by collecting rainfall from an unplanted sloping basin and catching it with a furrow and a ridge. Planting takes place on either side of the furrow where the water has infiltrated. The basins are created by digging out shallow furrows about 30 centimeters deep and 50 centimeters wide along each contour and placing the soil downslope of each furrow to create a ridge. Create cross ties. These are ridges that are 15 to 20 centimeters high and about 1 to 2 meters long, every 3 meters along the contour. Ties must be lower than the main ridges so that water never flows over the main ridges. Now use a rake or spade to level out each basin, as this is the water catchment area. Plant in 2 rows, one on either side of the ridge in the furrow. Place mulch in the furrows if possible. Fertility pits. Fertility pits enable runoff water to be captured and conserved in pits that are filled with organic matter, such as compost or manure. The organic matter increases the fertility of the soil and minimizes the loss of water from evaporation. Plants, particularly those which require a lot of water, such as bananas, pawpaws, and tree tomatoes, are grown in or around the pits, where they benefit from the moist and fertile soil. To make a fertility pit, you dig a circular pit about 1 meter deep in the shape of a bowl, and the soil is placed around the edge of the pit to form a ridge or mound. The pit itself is filled with organic matter, like an ongoing compost heap, and trees and bushes are planted around the rim. A diversion furrow is constructed upslope of the pit to direct excess runoff into the pit.